We've all been confronted by Covid-19 restrictions this past year. For me, having been a brass band player and conductor for several years and attending hundreds of rehearsals and events in person, suddenly with the onset of Covid-19 and subsequent lockdown, there were no physical practices to attend. This sudden change hit at the heart of the brass banding community. They'd always managed to meet, rehearse and perform in person and to audiences. Before Covid-19, many brass bands played at community events, mostly to an audience. Being seen in public can help with their image and encourage fundraising support, which is very important. For many brass bands and other social interest groups who enjoy performing inside and out to an audience and for their own pleasure, they have been forced to find alternative methods to perform and entertain, and also to keep their members in touch with their organisation. Were bands going to be faced with the problem that without members' interaction they wouldn't survive? So how did bands function before this pandemic? Groups rehearsed and performed in concert sitting or standing next to each other, with the leader or conductor generally standing at the front. Normally there were around 25 players in a brass band. They would meet up at least once a week for an hour or so's rehearsal, even more when they were getting ready for a concert or competition. Once lockdown had hit, they were losing out. What could they do, and whatever they chose, would it keep engaging members and the general public? Having used websites as a popular way of sharing information, online broadcasting seemed to fit. It could give them the chance to hold virtual meetups and online rehearsals while at home and for performances, reaching a much wider audience than they'd normally have at a concert. But how popular would it be with members? Would it continue audience engagement? And could it continue after the Covid-19 pandemic? You might ask, what is online broadcasting? Pictures, sounds and videos can be streamed from different locations to a mass audience using electronic transmission of data. This is also called telecommunications. The streaming part works by, say, a video is made, then afterwards uploaded to a video hosting website or platform, much like YouTube, Facebook or even TikTok. There's also live streaming. This is where an event is streamed live to people, and it can be recorded at the same time, just like you'd use on Facebook Live or Instagram Live. You can also have video on demand, or VOD as many people call it. You can choose what media you wish to watch online via a streaming service such as Netflix or Amazon Prime.
23rd of March is a date that will go down in history, when the first national lockdown started. And so, being left with the situation of no meeting up in person for rehearsals, many bands turned to online broadcasting. This proved popular for some members, but not for others. Either they didn't have the required technology, or didn't like using it at all. But gradually, players started to adopt it, and over time it was used for not only rehearsals, but contests, social meetings, and events. One event even became a replacement for an annual outside event.
In September, a brief return to rehearsals happened, but all had to be socially distanced and with limited numbers. Performers had to be 2 meters away from each other and PPE worn when not playing, as well as hand washing, temperature checks and other precautions. Suddenly from December, these stopped and all physical meetings ended again. It was back to online for bands. How did players and their audience take to the online broadcasting experience, and what were their individual opinions? Questionnaires and interviews helped to find out. The first of 2 questionnaires was sent to musical group members such as brass bands and choirs to identify their preferences to online broadcasting as a substitute to physical attendance, and their thoughts of its ease of use. Rob Tompkins from Brass Fest UK gave his thoughts on musical group members using online broadcasting.
I think one of the overriding things that people have said is that it doesn't replace the live performance, but when you're in a situation where the live performance isn't possible, then it has proved to be a very good alternative, and many people have found it very enjoyable to be part of.
This graph shows the amount of time in hours members spent in person and online per week on their activity prior to lockdown, and compared it to their same activity per week during lockdown. The blue line represents the hours in person per week before lockdown, red the hours online per week during lockdown, yellow the hours in person per week during lockdown, and green the hours online per week during lockdown. This showed the majority of members spent more time before lockdown on the activity than during lockdown. In fact, 2/3 less time was spent on it during lockdown though several spikes in the results suggested some spent up to 30 hours a week. However, according to further data, this was more likely to be brass band conductors preparing for their online rehearsals. Overall, 92% of questionees opted for some form of online broadcasting.
I think the ones that like them are band or players that really were just really looking for something to do, didn't want to allow the instrument to sit in the case gathering dust, so they were quite keen to be part of as much as possible. There are a few that don't like them. I think the recording process of trying to create live performances has been quite difficult for people. But yeah, I think in general, people have seen it as a positive thing rather than a negative thing.
Sam Wynn from Wanted Silver Band gave his thoughts on musical group members using online broadcasting.
I guess it's like with anything, you know, some members will like things, some members will not. You know, in real life before COVID, you know, some members liked like contests and some didn't. And now, you know, we've got a few players that haven't participated in my band or in the organisation as a whole, I suppose. And we've had a few players that haven't participated at all throughout the time. But you know, but they might log on for the quiz night or something. I wouldn't have thought there was one member from our organisation that's not done anything in the last year.
Giving an overview of preference to online broadcasting, it became clear that over 3/4 of members preferred to return to physical rehearsals. Only a few were prepared to attend in person and use online, but there was a complete refusal for rehearsing online only.
Attendance to them has been, I've been pleasantly surprised actually, but I think people's attitudes towards them have been quite, what's the word? Like anything can get in the way for them. You know, any excuse will do to shove them out of the way. If they want to go and see friends that night, they'll go and see friends that night. But in real life, band would come before anything.
What were Sam's thoughts on his band's rehearsals with conductor Paul Holland?
I will still say it now, and I said it to Paul. I think he does an amazing job, and I think he's a brilliant job at keeping people infused. It's nothing against him, but I don't particularly enjoy it. It depends what element. I much prefer actually doing the exercises than the pieces. And if it's things in like strict tempo, like I could play marches all night long, because they just work. But when you do a test piece with a cadenza in the middle, you're having to second guess what your phone your player's going to do. It's not very much fun. Also, for my own personal circumstance, I'm sat there with headphones in and a practice muting my instruments. So it's not the greatest playing experience.
Some appreciated the efficiency of online rehearsals, but missed playing with others, joining online with the streamed rehearsal when not able to attend in person. The most missed during online rehearsals was the fact they couldn't hear what fellow musicians were playing, because during the Zoom sessions they needed to mute themselves due to the internet lag making them sound out of time with others.
There are certain players that do struggle without other players around them. I think it may be a confidence thing, that with other players around them they feel more confident to play. Without those players they don't. So I think the players that are lacking somewhat in confidence do really find online rehearsals quite difficult, whereas those that are a little bit more outgoing maybe are not finding it such a problem. And in fact, it's one of those things that once you've tried it, then actually I think most people have realised that it's not as bad as maybe they thought it was.
Did Rob think the older generation had found it hard to adapt to online broadcasting?
I think to start with, it was something that people of the older generation didn't really sort of cling on to or get hold of too quickly. But certainly with help of children and grandchildren, slowly but surely these players have come on and become part of the conversations online as much as anybody else, and seem to be quite happy with it. Obviously they'll come online with microphones muted and it will take us a couple of minutes for them to figure out how to unmute it and various things like that, but no problem with that at all, and a bit of patience and they were soon joining in as happily with it as anybody else.
If they had all unmuted, it probably would have sounded something like this.
To you. Happy birthday to you.
They all felt learning is about listening to each other. But
there is something very special about having an audience in front of you, and the live music. We need to support it. We don't want it to be pushed out.
Annually, the Wanted Silver Band's Brass on the Grass outside event takes place with a large local audience attending. The decision in 2020 to live stream this event and allow it on demand later provided a great amount of work because it couldn't be filmed outside on the grass due to lockdown.
That was something that we always put on our calendar, and we felt that, from our organisation's perspective, that had to go ahead regardless of what the format was. So we had to do something to mark it because it's become a real feature of the calendar.
So, individuals filmed themselves in their own homes, and it was all pieced together to make a final performance. Here came the opportunity to analyse opinions of viewing online events as opposed to attending them physically. When this was viewed was an important point, as it would show how popular streaming could be. Learning that only 29% watched it live, whereas 53% watched it on demand later, showed how video on demand was the more popular way to view. Even more interesting was that those who watched it online felt it was more convenient to watch online than attend in person. They'd also been involved in the recording and thought it was an important landmark in the history of Wanted Silver Band. Those that watched it later said they weren't available at the time, or they weren't a user of Facebook, so waited for the email link, and some even forgot it was on. Over half used a computer to view, but it appeared no one casted from a device to a smart TV. How did Rob and Sam feel about using online broadcasting to keep in touch with members?
It's really just trying desperately to keep in touch with as many people as possible.
I'd have been quite miserable without it. I think from the performances we've done over the last year, we've probably become a better band. Our playing might not be up to scratch when we go back, but I think as a community, we probably got stronger.
At the core of online broadcasting is enjoyment, and as can be seen, this has been very well used during the pandemic. Let's hope that both online broadcasting and live performances will continue, but not compete.